I'm Eileen Liffring.
And I'm Damien Fowler.
And welcome to this edition of the Current Podcast. The Current is your deep dive into the future of TV, media, and data-driven marketing, all explained in plain English.
We talk to the biggest names in digital marketing, and this week we sit down with Robert Lambrechts, Chief Creative Officer at ad agency Pereira O'Dell.
Robert was the 15-year-old agency's first ever employee. An award-winning writer, Lambrechts has worked on everything from global campaigns, like Coca-Cola's A Magic Thank You, to Hollywood films, like The Dreams of Emma Bloom.
And in that time, Pereira O'Dell has made a name for itself within the highly competitive agency marketplace, working with brands like Mini, Adobe, Stella Artois, and recently wins like IHOB. Most recently, Pereira O'Dell, alongside Partner Service Plan, was named 2022 Independent Agency Network of the Year at the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity.
Robert sits down with the Current Podcast to talk all about his creative career, his Hollywood writing chops, candid thoughts on the emergence of AI, and something called a secret brief. In an industry where there's always a lot of movement, you have been at Pereira O'Dell for more than 15 years. First as a copywriter, as like the first hire on the team, and for the then last roughly 6 years as Chief Creative Officer. What has compelled you to stay at the agency for so long?
Oh my gosh. Truthfully, when the agency started, I got a call from PJ in the middle of the night. I'd moved to New York. Got a call from him in the middle of the night, asked me if I wanted to join. I said, no, thank you. He called me back 2 weeks later. And for whatever reason, I changed my mind, said, sure. And that the plan, honestly, was like, I'll do this for 5 years and find out what it's like to start something. 5 years turned into 15, apparently. My personal philosophy and the way I like to work just has lined up with, I found a group of people who feel the same way. And the first slide on the first presentation that we ever made was this idea of what if advertising were invented today? And it's just this philosophy of let's not have off-the-shelf solutions for every problem. Let's bring any new media, any new type of tool that are available today to solve this problem. Let's bring it to solve the problem.
And, you know, early on in your career, you had an important realization about what it means to follow like creative mentors and their like leadership. Can you tell us about that and perhaps how it has like shaped the way you go about your own career?
There's an interesting thing that happens I think as a creative. You go from doing the work and like being super passionate about the thing that you're doing and having this idea and wanting to take it all the way through and, you know, like really fighting for that. And then one day they give you the title of creative director and don't really tell you that everything you did before is different now. That management and leadership is a much different beast than the day-to-day creative, which kind of got you to where you wanted to be. And so it took me, frankly, a long time to understand what kind of creative director, what kind of leader I wanted to be, or I was best at. I think there's kind of two kinds of leaders. If you think about it, this is not original for me. I probably said multiple times, but I think there's people who are really good at being inspirational and having like really big vision and like really getting people like super duper inspired. And that's very, very important. That's not exactly who I am. I think there's the other style, then there's the other style of leadership, which is more of the people who kind of sit down next to you and really work things out. And it's really more of you get down in it with people. And I think there's a need for both, and one is not better or more important than the other. I happen to work with, I think, PJ Pereira is extremely inspirational. And I think for a long time, I was doing what I would call a very poor PJ Pereira impersonation. And that really wasn't working. And it took a while for me to just realize that's not what I needed to do. What I needed to do is more embrace who I am and the leadership style that I think works best for me and works best for the people I think around me. I'm pretty clear, I'm pretty direct, I'm pretty transparent. One way or another, people know where I stand and what I'm thinking. And I try and take the mentality that I'm very, very fortunate to work with a lot of extremely smart, talented, and frankly, most of them more creative than I am. And if I'm not getting what I think we need, it's my fault because I'm not articulating the vision clear enough for them. I'm not providing the feedback that is required to get to where we need to go. And that's really kind of the leadership style I try and embrace.
I love that. I want to ask you about, the last 15 years, while you've been at Pereira O'Dell, we've also seen the tech landscape change dramatically. We've had the iPhone, we've Netflix, streaming, Amazon, retail media networks like Walmart. And there's so many new destinations now for creative work. I'm wondering if that fact changes the way creative agencies operate.
It's almost hard to think about how dramatically the media landscape has changed. If the last 5 years, much less the last 15 years. I think what you're bringing up is a lot of people get upset about what they would say is the decline of the relevancy of an agency. But frankly, I think that's our own fault. We basically didn't adapt to technology quickly enough, and we got it handed to us by a bunch of other industries and companies. However, I will say, as long as agencies can try and adapt more to the technology and the different channels that are out there, I'm actually optimistic about the roles that agencies can play in the landscape.
What's exciting you about the kind of work that's being produced today? Anything you'd point to?
Part of the exciting thing of working today is just the sheer explosion of creativity in all walks of life from all different kinds of people, and the ability for people who would have never thought themselves creative to do something creative, right? Like that is just way more prevalent than it's ever been. To me, I can't necessarily point to exact things there, but just as a space that I think is exciting. And I say this hoping that they haven't been banned by the time this podcast comes out. But I think the TikTok space is actually very fascinating because it feels like a truly new medium that the language hasn't been developed. And it, to me, feels like a low risk place for brands and creatives to experiment and honestly have some fun. On the total 180 of that, I've been thinking about the new movie Air, the story of the, Air Jordans. I mean, that's an ad. Like, it's a big ad, right? And I haven't seen it yet, but all the reviews and everything I've read of it have been extremely positive, which to me just says, if you have a brand that people like and they like spending time with, they will spend a lot of time with it. And then if you combine that with really interesting storytelling, right, you can do some interesting stuff.
Definitely. There's a lot of opportunity there. I feel like we're just like starting in that area in some ways, almost.
The entertainment industry right now, basically nothing gets made unless it has some level of awareness. Like original stories, it's really hard to get off the ground. And entertainment is kind of running out of IP, right? Like we're almost to the bottom of the comic book character realm. So they're going to have to start looking other places. And the opportunity is there. Brands have cultural awareness. And then I think if you can combine that with some interesting storytelling, you can do some really amazing stuff.
And, I hear there's something called like a secret brief that you develop.
We have at Pereira O'Dell what we like to call the secret brief. And it's really more of a question we ask our client partners, and it really gets to like, what is the emotional drive for them underneath what they're doing. Why do they get excited to get up and go to work in the morning? What's the thing that's sort of driving them? And it's always the thing that you would never put down on a piece of paper because your colleagues would think you're insane. For example, we had one client say, if they had to say what they were after, they would just want their teenage son to think they worked at a cool company. Or another client was, who has works with a big franchisee network, was saying that they, the goal would be to be carried out of a dealer meeting by the dealers, which is different than a lot of other things, right? So it's getting to the heart of what motivates them in a way that, like I said, if they wrote it down on the brief and sent that to an agency, people would think they're crazy. But it really is what's at the heart of things.
You have a new client in IHOP, and IHOP is such a classic, American brand. It's been around for decades. Can you tell us about, just re-energizing that on such a legacy background?
It is really a truly iconic American brand. And in a lot of ways, it's really kind of an honor to work on it because it really means so much to a lot of people's lives. It is not just a restaurant that they go to. It's really a space that brings them joy and they connect with their family. And it means, a lot to people. The question is how do you basically energize that brand without alienating the people who loved it? And I think we're fortunate to work with a really ambitious client who really has a clearly articulated vision for what the brand is and its role in culture. And our job is to bring that to life in all different kinds of spaces, whether that's on TV, in restaurant, in their social channels, whatnot. So we're really focused on, just giving that brand energy. So it's always in front of people and it's top of mind when they're not just thinking about breakfast, when they're just hungry.
When you're talking about a legacy brand like that, you're sort of looking back and building, I guess, on the things that they've already established, but also then trying to throw it forward. I mean, you're at an interesting point between, history and the future. I guess there's a sense of responsibility there as well from your part.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, IHOP genuinely means something to a lot of people. More broadly, I think a lot of what we like to do in general at the agency, colliding the old and the new. And so I think when you start bringing things together like that, that's where you find really, really interesting things that are possible.
What would you say makes for an ideal client?
Early on in my career, I was sort of enamored with the logos, right? Oh, I want to work on that brand, or it'd be so great to work on that brand or whatever. And then it's a bit of the don't meet your heroes thing where you do that and it's that wasn't what I was expecting it to be. So, I think as I've grown and as I've, just worked in this industry for a long time, the thing that you realize, it's really about the people. And I think the people that we work best with, frankly, are ambitious. We work, I think, really well. And I personally really like working with people who want to do something different or to do something interesting, aren't happy with the way things are going, and really have the ambition to do something bigger. The draw of coming to work at Pereira O'Dell is you have big ambitions, and we can help you achieve them.
The agency itself has quite big ambitions, and I know in 2015, you did your first movie project, a short film called The Dreams of Emma Bloom that you wrote and co-directed. Could you talk a little bit about this project and how it drew you in and how that contributes to your vision, your creativity?
Yeah, the agency has always had really big ambitions. It's funny. When we started, we were 5 people working basically in an abandoned bar in Soma in San Francisco. And we honestly thought we were the greatest advertising agency that had ever happen. Like there was not a doubt in our mind. We've never, I don't think, been afraid to push into different areas, whether that be different spaces in advertising or different spaces in entertainment. You know, you mentioned the dreams of Emma Bloom. I don't even know exactly where it started, but it was the opportunity to do something different, and I learned quite a bit actually from that experience that has also just applied to other projects that we've been working in the entertainment space. And you know, I randomly had the opportunity to write a book for a project a long time ago. The agency had a project called Rolling Words to launch a Snoop Dogg album. We created a songbook of Snoop Dogg's lyrics printed on rolling papers, and a publisher found that and wanted to do it, but the song lyrics that's a rights nightmare. So they were looking for something else in the cannabis space, and me and a creative director, Estefanio Holtz, who now works at BBH, had this idea to create something called High Art, which was essentially the idea is art is confusing, weed can help. And it was essentially paired different strains of weed and gummies and whatever with different artworks to help them make sense. And that was another opportunity that I had to do.
What's the name of the book?
High Art, currently on sale on Amazon for perfect gift for someone friendship you value at $15.
Okay, great. I'm going to get that straight away.
You guys have also done branded entertainments. You've won an Emmy, which is crazy, for Outstanding New Approach to Television, which, unless I'm wrong, this made the agency the first to win an Emmy against like traditional TV programming. Can you tell us about that film and maybe why it was so successful?
We created this film for Intel. It was called The Beauty Inside. I want to be clear that I wasn't necessarily directly involved with that project. That was Jason Epoliski, current executive creative director at POD, and Jamie Robinson, who is the founder of Joan. The two of them were really the fundamental drivers of that project. But essentially, it was this amazing idea that they had. It's a story of a guy who wakes up every day as a different person. And it was for Intel and Toshiba. And so every day he basically recorded who he was in the previous day on the laptop. And what that did was actually allowed for the audience to play a role. So we put out all the different characters that people could play, and the people just filmed their own video of it. And then we collected those and used some of them in the actual film. It became a feature film in Korea. It was also turned into a TV series in Korea. And then I think is coming back to the United States as a piece of IP. So that has had an interesting life.
Would you say there's any like emergent areas of advertising or creative that you're like maybe the most interested in right now? I know like AI and ChatGPT are all the rage.
Yeah, I guess we're contractually obligated to have a conversation about AI.
Yes, we are.
The AI issue is an interesting one. It's pretty amazing how quickly it's become something, right? If you think about what we were talking about last year at this time, it was all metaverse and NFTs and whatever, and that seems to have gone completely away. And now we're like somehow like it's all AI all the time. You know, personally, I will never understand humanity's drive to make itself obsolete with this technology, but given that, you know, it's not going anywhere and it's coming faster than I think anyone can get their hands around. You know, it is going to fundamentally change everything that we do, from the way that we get insights. You know, you can get insights strategically much faster, to the way ideas come about, to how they're produced. So this is all going to, you know, really fundamentally change. And we're really, 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 really at the very, 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 very beginning of it. And it's almost impossible to tell where it's going. You know, my biggest concern about it all is really like, if you think about, where search was however long ago, right? There was Google, and then there was Bing, and then there was Yahoo, and there was these different, and there was a bunch of different options, which basically essentially just became Google. That same thing happening with AI, I think is relatively concerning, that basically we're all going to have one thing thinking for us, is concerning. And, I would hope that we sort of learned our lesson from the early internet. Everyone was like, no one thought anything bad would ever happen with the internet. It's like, this thing is amazing. What bad could ever happen with this? And we weren't skeptical of the technology at all. So I'm just hoping we as people, as communities, governments, approach this with some degree of skepticism to try and, not let it get out of control.
Yeah. Somebody had sent, the songwriter Nick Cave, a song that they'd asked ChatGPT to create in his style, and he said it was a grotesque mockery of what it means to be human. Creativity requires our humanness, and he said that, and I agree with that. So in that sense, I think we still have value.
We'll always have value, right? It's just, I do think it will kind of call into question what is creativity. I mean, I think there's a way to look at creativity, frankly, that is, if you looking at more statistically, it's just like the least likely outcome that someone could come to, right? So if you give 100 people a problem, 98% of them are going to come up with the same solution. It's those 2% that come up with something different that we term as creativity, right? That's a creative solution to that. What AI is doing now is really just recapping what we've already known back to us. So I think a lot of it feels very bland and frankly not all that interesting a lot of times when you mess around with this stuff. But it doesn't mean it won't be able to get to that 2%.
And that's it for The Current. Stay tuned, because next time we'll have Lee Walsh, the global head of media at Uber.
If somebody's an Uber consumer, for them to use all the relevant products which we offer. And for me, when I joined Uber, I just didn't realize how deep the app was and everything that we had to offer. So really the overarching goal of Uber One is to make our most loyal consumers feel valued and to reward them, but then also to try and make those consumers use all aspects of our product.
The Current is produced by Wonder Media Network. Our theme is by Love and Caliber. The Trade Desk team includes Chris Brooklier and Kat Fessy.
And remember,
as long as agencies can try and adapt more to the technology and the different channels that are out there, I'm actually optimistic about the roles that agencies can play in the landscape.
I'm Elise.
I'm Damien.
And we'll see you next time.